Chapter 10, Muslim Civilization. Chapter focus question is, who was Muhammad and how did his teachings lead to the rise and the spread of Islam? So the first section here is the rise of Islam, and the focus question is, what messages or teachings did Muhammad spread throughout Islam? By the end of the section, I can understand how Muhammad became the prophet of Islam, describe the teachings of Islam, and explain how Islam helped shape the way of life of its believers. So some of the key terms, people, places to be paying attention to is Muhammad, Mecca, Hajra, Medina, Kaaba, Quran, Mosque, Hajj, Jihad, and Sharia. So for the first objective, how did Muhammad become the prophet of Islam? So let's go through a little bit of quick background information for Muhammad. So Muhammad is born in Mecca, and Mecca is kind of this interesting place. It's not only a crossroads of trade, but the thing that made local business people actually the most money is it was a pilgrimage center. It had this place called the Kaaba. It was an ancient temple, and it housed many of the pagan gods in Arabia. And so what ended up happening is people from all over Arabia would come not just for the trade, but they'd come on pilgrimages to visit this temple and check out the pagan gods and kind of pay homage to them or whatever it is that they might do. But there was a pretty good tourist business that kind of revolved around this Kaaba. So Muhammad ended up marrying a wealthy widow, and through this wealthy widow, he ended up leading trade caravans, and he ended up getting a pretty good reputation for just being an honest, decent person, and for being a devoted husband and father. And so he was well known and well respected throughout the region. The other thing about him is he was always a very deeply spiritual person. So even though he may not have followed any one religion, his spirituality was always there. He'd often go out and meditate in the desert, and he was kind of searching for questions or answers to questions. He was always kind of troubled by the materialism of the people from his hometown. They seemed to enjoy accumulating things, and that really didn't kind of do it for him or cut it for him. So anyway, on one of these meditations, he is visited by Angel Gabriel, and God, who he referred to as Allah. Allah is the Arabic word for God, sent Gabriel to Muhammad, asking him to be a great prophet. His wife Khadijah is one of the first converts to Islam, and Islam means to submit to God. So Islam is the religion, and Muslims are the follower of the religion. So if you think of it in terms of Christianity, Christianity is the religion, and then you have followers who are Lutherans, followers who are Catholics, followers who are Baptists. So it's not all that different. And so the beginning of this whole thing is the Hijra in 622 AD. This is the beginning of Islam, and it's year one in the Muslim calendar. Muhammad ends up getting driven out of Mecca because many of the business leaders are afraid that what he is preaching and teaching, this belief in one God, is going to ruin their touristry business. And so they're getting pretty ticked off at him, and they tell him to knock it off, but he doesn't, and he keeps preaching that there's only one true God. And sooner or later, the townspeople get up in arms, and they drive Muhammad and his handful of followers out, and he flees to Medina. Several years later, he returns with many more believers, and he enters the Kaaba, and he destroys all the pagan gods, and he rededicates the temple to the one true God, Allah. And it's kind of interesting because the Kaaba is believed to have been built originally by Abraham. So there's this tie to Judaism and Christianity in this story as well. So if we look at what are the teachings of Islam, some of the few basic ones is that people are ultimately responsible for their actions. The other thing is it doesn't require priests. Islam believes that you don't need to have a religious person necessarily as the go-between for God to you, that you can develop your own personal relationship. And they also believe that without priests, it encourages the equality of all believers. And they also believe that Abraham, Moses, and Jesus were all very important prophets. It's just that Muhammad happens to be the last and the greatest of these prophets. Muhammad's words are put into the Quran, which is the holy book. The Quran can only be written in Arabic, which makes it a widespread language, and it helps unite the empire. So a lot like Latin united the Roman Empire, Arabic unites the Islamic Empire, and it sets ethical standards of honesty, generosity, social justice. So if we get to the 5 key teachings, they are known as the 5 pillars of faith. There's an infographic on page 307 that does a good job of explaining these. But very quickly, the first pillar is the statement of faith, that God is an all-powerful, compassionate, and there's only one. The second pillar is prayer. Pray 5 times daily facing Mecca. They can go to a mosque, which is a house of worship, but you can really pray anywhere, and you just put down your rug and you kneel towards Mecca and you say your prayers. The third thing is alms, giving a portion of your wealth to the needy. That's a bit like tithing in Christianity. Fasting for 1 full month of Ramadan. They can't eat or drink anything from sunup to sundown. And the fifth is Hajj, a pilgrimage once during your lifetime to Mecca. So you're supposed to go to Mecca and kind of recreate this return of Muhammad to Mecca. And this fifth one is really only if you can afford it. If it's going to ruin your life, it's not necessarily a requirement. It's just something that's strongly encouraged. So other beliefs, jihad, which isn't the jihad that we think of. It's been kind of misunderstood recently, but a jihad is struggle in God's service. Usually this means a personal duty in overcoming some immorality within themselves or some kind of religious shortcoming. So let's say, for example, that you don't do a very good job with the second pillar of faith, that you don't really pray 5 times daily facing Mecca like you're supposed to. Really, your own personal jihad is to become better at prayer. The other thing is they see Muslims, Jews, Christians, they all worship the same God. And so for Islam, they consider Jews and Christians people of the book because they believe in the same God and follow some of the same teachings. So when we look at Islam, a way of life, the way it shapes people's life, one is Sharia law, which maybe some of you have heard of. It's an Islamic system of law that includes interpretations of the Quran, and so these two things become merged, law and religion. But it regulates moral code, family life, business, government. There's all kinds of laws based on the teachings of the Quran that become political or governmental laws that shape the way people live. If you look at the impact of Islam on women, it did extend rights and protections to women that they didn't have before. One of the things that's kind of happened over time is that Islam has adopted the practices of conquered peoples. So, for example, the Persians would veil the women in upper societies so that you couldn't see their faces. And they also secluded women from public. And so that was something that was not part of Islam. But like many of our religions and beliefs and governments today, cultural diffusion plays a role, and you get these merging of practices and beliefs, and that's where those things come from.